So I think we could stop the screen share. Yeah, so we have, there's a range of emotions I think we're all probably feeling, right? We're inspired by colleagues, curious, we have thoughtful. I'm interested in the frustrated comment because I think that's a valid feeling when learning about so many things and thinking about how to implement them in your own space and how that might work. Inspired, overwhelmed with what I want to do, overwhelmed. So maybe we can use this session to kind of deal with that collective feeling of being overwhelmed and digesting and being inspired at the same time. So I will reintroduce myself. I'm Melanie Garcia Simpson. I'm a curatorial associate at the Block Museum of Art and work on a lot of different projects with collections, interpretation. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a woman in her 30s with black hair and glasses. And I work at, again, the Block Museum of Art at Northwestern, which sits on the homelands of the Council of the Three Fires.
And hi, I'm Dziekan. I'm calling in from Melbourne, where it's bright and early, or as you can see, still very dark in the morning. And I'm speaking to you from the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation in Melbourne, and recognize the continuing connection to land, waters, and culture of country. And I guess the word that I would probably use would be waking up in terms of, but I think what you've just introduced there, Melanie, is great. I think it'd be really nice to tap into some of those emotions and how they actually kind of play into a discussion around interpretation, storytelling, and education.
So we're here, I mean, we're going to reiterate that we're here as facilitators and not as experts, and that we weren't able to attend all of the sessions, so hoping there's some collective wisdom to be shared. And I'll point people to Slack because the session leaders and participants have posted great materials if you weren't able to make the sessions, shared resource documents, just a lot of great stuff. I'm gonna put, so there's 37 of us. Do you think we'll stay in this configuration?
Yeah, why not? I think so.
Sure.
We were weighing up sort of breakout rooms and things like that, but yeah, if unless we get kind of people saying they want breakout rooms, I think we could probably stay together.
So I'll put the, in case they're helpful, I'll put the 4 questions that we started with at the beginning of the day into the chat. I may have written them differently after I had attended a couple of the sessions, but maybe we can start with, what insights stuck with you and what questions are you left with? Maybe people who are inspired, what were you inspired by? Or if you're curious to learn more, what would you want to know more about?
I think we've got something in the thread there from Emily. What's next for best practices? Does anybody have a take on that from perhaps something that you engaged with in one of the presentations before? Yeah, please, go ahead. Yeah, feel free to jump in, everybody.
Okay, I wasn't actually going to reply to Emily's comment, but kia ora, I'm Tim. I'm joining from Wellington in Aotearoa. So shout out to you, Vince, in the longest lockdown of all time, I think, in Australia. Yes. But yes, I just wanted to just say I had 2 sessions that were really inspiring in terms of the scale. One was the lightning talks of all the different things that are going on. And that was mind-blowing, just the scale of little things, but the heart of the people doing them, and already grabbed a bunch of ideas. But also I think really enjoyed the session with Leslie Half Moon and her colleagues there about the immersive theatre in Oklahoma, and that was just really stunning not just on the scale of it, because it's the complete opposite of my project. It's a full installation, which isn't what I do, but to see that scale was amazing, but also just hearing from them and the process and the detail and the respecting of and the respecting and centering of an Indigenous voice, and that was really powerful to hear. Again, my project works across the Pacific, but to hear it replicated, the heart of that in North America was really heartwarming. So I just wanted to acknowledge all of the presenters in both of those, and thank you for that inspiration.
I was just going to kind of maybe sort of prompt something a little further there in terms of making that connection to best practice. Do you think there is something maybe in that recognition around, Indigenous knowing as an example that would kind of be something that maybe helps us to think or even rethink what we understand to be best practice in sort of, digital interpretation, engagement, or education?
I think and I don't have the chat, so I apologize to Leslie and her presenters if I quote this wrong, but she said at one point, it was a really nice phrase. She said, tribal time doesn't work at the speed of light. And I think so often what happens in terms of digital delivery time is we think in a contractual time or a project time and a budget time. And I think what that project did was to actually recenter an Indigenous way of thinking in terms of its graphic design, in terms of the display, in terms of the oral stories, but also the process behind it was reflecting actually a relational time and a relational space. You're not just building a product at the end, or you're building relationships that shine a light and to re-highlight. And I think that's a challenge if budgets are on a 12-month scale, or in funded in a particular way, and leadership, is looking for deliverability and metrics, because so much of our relational space isn't measurable in a contractual space, and I think, but the output, and again, is so much more powerful. And I think for both ends, for the piece that Leslie described, but I was also thinking of I think this is the Battleship New Jersey project, which was just a YouTube channel that has created a relationship with thousands of people because it centers it on storytelling and an experience rather than a fixed project. So
and a relationship that might be more enduring in some way, or kind of is paving the way for an ongoing relationship rather than something that's, I guess, kind of transactional in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those stories from that museum are going to exist long beyond whether or not the installation's installed, right? So how do you honor that in an ongoing way? But yeah, thank you.
Cool. Interesting.
Just to carry on that thought about the relationships being able to be ongoing, on that on the project that was at the New Jersey Battleship Museum, people who might still have been very interested, but maybe don't live nearby or wouldn't have gotten a membership for financial reasons or just because it's inconvenient, they're able to have an ongoing longer term relationship with not only the content, but also then the museum, in a way that, it's not the same immersive experience you'd get in a visit, but it's also not done in several hours. Like it's something that continues. And even if the videos are short, if you're engaging on a regular basis, it's something that you're continuing to, participate in. And I mean, the success of that project is amazing. I was like blown away by it.
We have a question about scalable projects. So how you move from initial experiments to the next level and growing capacity. I wonder if anyone who spoke in the hybrid model section might be able to speak to that. Or anybody who attended that session. It seemed like that was a theme.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to hear more from anybody just about the value of experimentation, and I guess that kind of willingness to experiment, and whether again that is kind of that, you know, light touch, small scale, you know, sort of experiments, through to how they have maybe translated into kind of, you know, more wholesale kind of insights, you know, that have translated then into kind of into, you know, become incorporated, you know, into practices. I'm wondering if anybody's got something on that.
I don't know if Kate Myers-Emery is here, but she was one of the people moderating the all it takes is staff time, low to no budget stuff, and she was talking about how some, you know, you do these small little projects, and that, you know, with the resource of staff time, of course, but without other costs, right? And or with minimal other costs, and that the offshoot of that is that once you produce the result, then that's something that you can therefore get a grant for after, right? Because you can sort of like test the grounds that way, and then get the funding for a larger project down the you know, down the pike at some point. So, but she didn't give like a specific like this project, this is how we did it, but and I've been experiences where people, where we planned for a project, and whether or not we got the grant, we were going to do it anyway. But we had separate plans, right? If we didn't get the grant, then we were going to do it this way. If we got the grant, then we were going to do it that way. So if you have a plan, if you have like multiple plans in place, and imagining what the larger scale thing could be and what that looks like, that can be helpful. It can help funders see what you have in mind for what you want to do, or you know, your management in terms of their allocation of resources, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just kind of think with some of this, you know, obviously a backstory, you know, to all of this has been the experience of the past 18 months. And yes, you know, we are still here in lockdown in Melbourne. And, you know, actually yesterday we had the, you know, highest case numbers experienced locally, you know, over the 18 months. So it's, you know, again, a continuing issue that everybody's going to obviously have to find ways to live with. But I'm just wondering if kind of a spirit of experimentation has kind of been instilled in some ways by the pandemic experience. And again, the way that, you know, that rapid response to maybe projects has kind of started to maybe bed in some ways. I just wonder if anybody has any observations or experiences, either from the presentations or from their own, that, you know, kind of speak to that.
I can jump in again. So I did do a presentation just on a game that we created. We made it using like our survey platform, not a gaming platform. We didn't allocate the time to, like I had to learn a little bit more about the survey platform to be able to use and abuse it in the way that I did. But, you know, we didn't allocate the time to like learn some of the other more intentional platforms for games and things like that. And because of that, we were kind of able to slide it under the radar of our management as far as like, you know, this isn't going to be a massive investment of time. You know, we're not going to take a bunch of money to do this thing. We just want to make it. It was a little bit more of a situation where we felt like we could like ask for forgiveness, not permission. So we were able to do that first. And then since we had made it, they were like, "Mm, okay, you can try it with like a couple of our schools that do week-long programs." And when that got good traction, then we were able to share it a little bit wider. And now there's talk about actually investing a little bit of money, to make it look a little bit more professional. We did what we could, but it's covered in branding from a website and things like that. So I think that both because we're not, we're still off site as well. Like my team is all still working from home. But like both because we are needing to do things in a whole new way. We often don't have access to the resources, like which are collections and the sites and things that, are so important to the work that we do and are what is the draw. We're needing to come up with new and alternative ways to do things. If you don't have the building, or if you don't have the amazing, fossils, what is the draw? And since we have to come up with new things, we're able to get away with a little bit more experimentation and a little bit more looseness. And I think it'll change, but people are still kind of riding the wave of they're expecting things to not necessarily be perfect. They just want to see them. Although I do think that that's going to shift to people expecting more professional, polished things pretty quickly.
And I'm wondering, when you're saying people, I'm wondering where audiences kind of fit into that, because I'm kind of getting a sense that some of those people might be, internal stakeholders, but also I guess the expectations or the desires of audience. Have you got a take on how that plays into your example?
Yeah, we're just able to I work at a legislature, which our organization just takes things very seriously. And I think because I'm going to say this delicately, because we want to be taken, because it's a serious and important institution, they feel like they have to always be very serious, or they won't be seen to be important. So we haven't been able to use humor in really anything we've ever done ever before. But we're able to have some humor in this because it was smaller scale. It's online. They're not at the site. And we actually got a lot of pushback on the humor aspects of it. But the audience has responded really well to that. Our audience is grade 6 kids, 11-year-olds. And they like humor. They think it's funny and engaging, and it makes something like the process of how an idea becomes a piece of legislation more interesting and engaging. So we've been able to kind of use that to prove that this is an effective tool. We're not using it trivially. We're all professionals that are making deliberate, intentional choices with it, and hopefully we'll be able to translate some of that evidence into being able to use it in some of our on-site programming when we're able to be back on site.
Yeah, I think your comment there's resonated with a few people around, that importance of humor, and how, as a survival mechanism, maybe in some ways, but also I guess that crack has kind of maybe been opened up, and people have jumped into it. I personally attended the open collections session earlier, and it was quite obvious that some of the projects in that are very much about kind of engaging with being playful, and that's one of the ways that I guess people would like to feel like they can engage with culture and consume culture in that sort of playful way. So yeah, I think that's really quite interesting. Was there another sort of question or two, Melanie, that you?
I think Allison was going to speak.
Oh, sorry, Allison.
Oh, no worries. I was just going to say, Kelsey, I resonate with you so hard. Archives of Ontario here. I completely got you and the oversight and the the hesitancy around humorizing collections. But I just wanted to respond to something Vincent you were saying, or Vince, apologies, regarding sort of or Kelsey, you were talking about this as well, about the sort of shifting expectations of our visitors regarding our programming and the interpretation we've been doing virtually. I just this morning got an email from a teacher who wanted to book a virtual workshop, and she was saying she's all ready to book, but her board wants to check with me how many virtual workshops we've delivered to date to grade 7 and 8 students, and she wants bio statements for our 2 presenters so that the board can vet us to kind of, I don't know, check who we are. I don't know, see if we're good enough, basically. But they want to obviously find out how many of these programs we've delivered. So their expectations are changing. To this point, I've not had any boards ask us, okay, how many workshops, or any teachers say okay, how many of these have you done? At this point now, this is the first signal that at least this board and this teacher, their expectation has changed, of course, and clearly, and they're looking for some modicum of quality or expectation that we've done this before, but they also want to know who are these people and what is their background, which is not unheard of. I've definitely been asked before, what are my qualifications, but this is the first time with a virtual workshop I've been asked that before. So that was new this morning.
That's a really interesting one. Do you have a sense of what's behind that? Is there something in the water kind of thing?
They also asked us for a vulnerable sector check, which is a police check. So I think it's a board requirement. Yeah.
Yes, that's what that was in the back of my mind. It's something like that. Yeah. It's an interesting one, because one of the notes that I kind of sort of took from what I was attending before is, we and this, of course, we're at a museum technology conference. We think about asking the question, how are new technologies influencing or changing the way we approach interpretation, storytelling, education. That's a natural go-to in terms of us framing that discussion. But I guess it's increasingly apparent that there are these kind of changing sort of, I guess, kind of emerging audiences that we need to be considering, and how are those expectations influencing and maybe transforming our way of thinking about those kinds of practices. So I think the discussion around audiences is really, really important. And I'm just kind of thinking of how here in Australia, the Australia Council just published a participation survey. And this was kind of gauging sort of, participation across the arts sector. So we're talking museums, we're talking performing arts, we're talking music, we're talking theater, and kind of, surveying, how that has changed over the past 2 years. And again, I think it's just a really interesting, I guess, kind of sort of thing to be looking at. And I'm wondering if there are maybe some other either policies or reports or studies that have been done, maybe that other people would be familiar with, specifically around participation and maybe changing audiences, or the changing needs, or I guess kind of influence of audience. Is there any sort of examples that people have out there that might add to that mix? I would certainly recommend, if anybody wants to just kind of check it out, you would just do a Google search for the Australia Council of the Arts participation survey, and you'll find the document. Melanie, was there any other things that we had on our list that we haven't gotten to?
No, I might let the list fade, but things that people are talking about kind of struck a chord with me. This idea that I love this, using a survey platform and gamifying that, and using, not trying to hire developer that you don't have money for and all of this stuff, because I think being kind of new to this space, I do often, I'm having conversations where I'm trying to like, how do I say this? Like, I know enough about technology that people kind of are like, oh, maybe you can make this, like, make this more, more people like it if it's flashier, or if it's, you know, uses a new tool or something, and realizing that, you know, some of the stuff that we that gets the most engagement are, you know, PDFs, teacher guides, because they have content that people can't get anywhere else. So I really, you know, a lot of what was happening, the conversation, the culture bridge conversation was like really resonated with me in my work. And also in terms of, I don't know, this is maybe too simple of a response to what you're saying, Vince, but in terms of audiences shifting, thinking about like how some of us who are museums that are pretty local, like I'm at a university museum, I think someone else in the chat also is. And so having this very kind of specific audience, although that's not the only audience we care about, but it's a pretty kind of small and dedicated audience, and then having programs move online, and even the fact that student docents give tours and family members across the country are logging in to watch them, it's kind of changed the dynamic of our programming.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess with the time that we've got left, I'm wondering if there are any kind of, you know, questions from the floor, or points of discussion that anybody would like to take the opportunity.
I was in the Origins immersive storytelling experience, you know, and I've been going to this is my 6th year at MCN, and like 7 times or 5 times, 6 times going to museums of the web, and in other experiences that I've seen, I have never seen an example of co-creation where you're really creating something with your community and letting them have the authority over what is happening in your space. That has gone wrong, right? Every time that happens, the outcome is right. The outcome is a good thing, right? Time and time again, every single time I see this, like I've seen this in presentations at these conferences. I've seen this at a museum I worked at before, when they, you know, suddenly were like winning awards for this exhibit at a university museum that does not win awards, right? Suddenly all these accolades, right? It's so any opportunity that you can get to identify the right communities that you want to work with, and then give them the driver's seat and run everything past them first, it's going to be better for you to do. So there it is.
And like just the acceptance that kind of work, it's a longer timeline, and it's a lot of, you know, building trust, and you know, can't happen as quickly as like make a website, you know, in a few weeks.
No, it's a longer term thing, and that's the relationship idea has been spanning multiple days of this conference so far, about like, you know, that really this work is about building relationships, right? Which I teach to my students about how development is about building relationships, but like fundraising, right, is about building relationships. But it turns out that museum technology is also the same.
I think that's a great sort of, not necessarily a kind of a postscript or anything, but I think that idea of just kind of the connection to relationships, and how forging and maintaining and caring, you know, for those relationships is increasingly such a central part of what, you know, we do, you know, as, you know, museum practitioners, as educators. You know, I think that's you know, really great, really fundamental. Again, Melanie, anything? I'm looking at kind of our clock.
Well, I think I'll just point out that there's a global recap panel on November 10th that we hope to see people at. And that also there's a networking event immediately following the session that I hope to see some of you at. But Vince, I know you have some comments here at the end.
Yeah, sure. I was hoping just to kind of, take the opportunity here as a bit of a wrap up to also just bring a new publication series to everyone's attention. So I hope you won't mind me kind of introducing this to you, and I'm hoping that some of you would be interested in getting in touch offline in due course. But maybe as a way of just wrapping up, I might just share screen and very quickly introduce you to this particular publication series. So sorry, I'm sharing my screen. There we go. Hopefully everybody can kind of see our slides. But as some of you might be aware, I've been working quite extensively in the space of museum technology from a scholarly perspective. And in terms of work that we've done in this area, drawing your attention and the fact that recently we have converted the Routledge Handbook of Museums, Media and Communication to open access. So would certainly welcome and kind of gift this publication to everyone that's here. This is a book that was published 2 years ago with Routledge, a book that I edited along with my colleagues, Kirsten Drottner, Kim Schroeder, and also Ross Parry. And Ross and I have subsequently, as a flow through from this book, developed a new book series with Routledge, which is titled Critical Perspectives on Museums and Digital Technology. We currently have 4 contracted books, which should start hitting the shelves next year. But again, we're also in a very developmental stage with this, and speaking to many people about upcoming projects and developing those with a range of contributors. The series itself is really looking to, as it says here, not only face the implications that this transitional moment presents, but rise to new challenges that this unprecedented state of affairs inevitably carries with it. And as museums hurtle towards their post-digital horizon at an accelerated rate, the deeply mediated, even symbiotic relationship, pointing back to the relationship between museums and technology, demands reframing and reassembly. So that's a bit of our kind of position statement on that. But just to kind of draw the range of ideas and the things that have been discussed here around within this theme area of interpretation, digital storytelling, and education. I'm hoping that you can see or anticipate the way how important some of these ideas and conversations that we've spoke about over the last 45 minutes can fit into this matrix of thinking about digital museums, and recognizing that when we're talking about digital, we're talking now about things like confidence, decolonization, experience, history, inclusion, transformation. These are the ways that we're understanding digital and the implications of digital. And we're seeing that these are the kinds of insights and questions and values, that we're needing to kind of engage with. We're needing to kind of understand and explore things around capability and literacy, through to narrative, understanding, management, capacity, and change. These are the kind of things that any discussion of digital in the context of museums today needs to be framing that discussion by. And when we're talking about museums and that relationship to technology, we're recognizing, the web, of course, as being kind of a platform within that, but also AI increasingly and design practices within that. And so again, you know, ideas and issues around ethics, ideas around purpose, innovation, and ultimately, you know, achieving a confidence and maturity around how we're thinking about the digital museum or the post-digital museum as it might actually be. So within this, you know, matrix, and these are just kind of indicative of the types of titles and the types of thematics and the types of discussions that we're initiating through the book series. I'd be really interested to hear from people in due course around work that you're doing, around case studies, around possible ideas that you might have, that again, specifically within the context of our session today, where digital interpretation fits in, or digital storytelling. And certainly education is something that, you know, but because both Ross and I are embedded both in academia, Ross in the Museum Studies at the University of Leicester, and myself here in Melbourne at Monash University in a School of Art, Design and Architecture. Again, we're recognizing that education is also kind of due for perhaps a bit of an update in terms of how we're thinking about the educative mission and the practices of museums in that space as well. So again, just to leave that as a bit of an exit, please don't hesitate to get in touch offline. My email address is there on the screen. And I'd certainly welcome hearing from anybody with ideas or around possible contributions in the future. So again, I hope that is not a shameless plug, but actually maybe presents a way for seeing how some of those kind of thought lines that we've kind of touched on today, you know, actually factor into a way of rethinking what digital and museums and the relationship between them is and can be. So thank you.
Thanks. I'll also say get in touch. I'm looking to connect with people too and get in touch. If you're interested in talking about collaboration among departments and museums, I'm on a very young digital strategy committee, and we're trying to make it work. And a lot of these questions about, you know, talking to leadership about what you're doing and digital planning, and what Allison, what you shared was so helpful, hearing how it's changed the way you work. Love to talk more about that stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening.